There are 5 income engines, and most people try to make money without knowing which engine they're operating. So they work harder, they try different ideas, and they still stay stuck. If you don't understand the actual structure that generates income, you can spend years chasing money in a low ceiling environment and never reach your true potential because you've been trying stuff without knowing if that actually works. In the last video, we talked about how money is created. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where money actually comes from in this economy. The real structure that generates income and wealth. This is part of a 4-video series where I explain exactly how money is made. My name is Tazafar and I spent years as a successful investor generating 6-figure returns and as an entrepreneur with expertise in sales. And after studying how wealthy individuals actually build money over time, one pattern becomes very clear. Each and every dollar earned in this economy comes from one of 5 income engines. Not 10, not 100, 5. And wealthy people, the people who really have the money, don't just rely on one, they stack them strategically. Today I'm going to map all 5 engines, how they work, and how they connect to real generational wealth. Now, before we jump into the 5 engines, we need to understand something very important. What exactly is an income engine? An income engine is simply a system that produces money in a predictable way. It has rules, it has mechanics, it has scaling limits, and it has different risk levels. If you don't know which engine you're operating inside, you cannot optimize it, you cannot scale it, and you cannot escape its limitations. So the first step towards real financial clarity is understanding the engines themselves. Now, without further ado, let's jump into engine number 1, high value skills. This is where almost everyone starts, and it's one of the most powerful ways to increase income quickly. A high value skill is when you exchange specialized expertise for money, not just time, expertise. Now, when it comes to skills and expertise, the market always pays more when 3 things happens. The skill needs to be rare, the skill needs to produce measurable results, and the skill directly impacts revenue or risk. This is why some skills command much higher income than others. Let's look at some examples of high-value skills. Data analysis, financial modeling, negotiation, artificial intelligence, process optimization, cybersecurity. You'll notice a pattern in all of these. All of these skills directly influences economic outcomes. They help businesses make more money or prevent them from losing money. And because the stakes are higher, the pay becomes higher. When you're making people money, you're gonna get your share. And when you're saving people money, you are still gonna get your share. The markets can't run away from that. This engine works because you become economically valuable. People are not paying for just your time, they're paying for access to your capabilities. And here's the kicker. As you do more work, your skill level increases. And as your skill level increases, the size of the problem you solve increases. And as that happens, your income increases as well. But there's a major limitation. Even very high paid professionals face ceilings. You could be the best at what you do, but there's only so much time and energy you can give. You're eventually gonna burn out. So high value skills build income power, but by themselves, they rarely create full financial freedom. However, we need to understand this. Skills are still very critical because almost every other engine uses them. And almost every wealthy person started by building capabilities for themselves. Now let's jump into engine number 2. Assets. An asset is something that generates money repeatedly after it is created or purchased. You work once and it pays you multiple times. There are many examples of assets: rental properties, dividend paying stocks, digital products, online courses, softwares, royalties. Assets are powerful because they produce income independent to your active effort. This breaks the traditional relationship between time and income. Instead of trading hours for money, the asset continues producing value over time. And as that happens, money begins to compound. Assets are where wealth equation begin to change dramatically. They're the first step into generating wealth because now your income is no longer limited by the number of hours you've personally put in. Now, again, assets usually require something first. They require capital, they require time to build, or they require skills, which is why most people use engine number 1, skills, to build engine number 2. Skills generate income, income builds assets, and assets are compounding. Engine number 3 is the most important in generating real wealth. And engine number 3 is business. A business is a system that delivers value through organized processes. It coordinates stuff. It coordinates people, capital, product, marketing, and delivery to create scalable income. Businesses are powerful because they can serve many customers at the same time. A single individual has limited capacity, but a business can potentially expand infinitely. It can increase pricing, it can build brand value, It can build person value. It can build your value. And it generates equity that can eventually be sold. There are many types of businesses. Some examples include service business, product, e-commerce, agencies, franchises, and many more. Different models, but the same principle: systemized value delivery. And if you don't understand what value is and how important it is, go watch the last video where we talk about how money is actually created. That will change your perspective in what value is and what it does for people. Coming back to businesses, because businesses combine skill, leverage, and scale, they are one of the fastest way to build wealth. Now you have generated skills, you've started to accumulate assets, you've started a business. What's engine number 4? Engine number 4 is ownership. Ownership means you own a percentage of something that grows in value. You're not simply working inside the system anymore, you own part of the system. Some examples include company shares, startup equity, real estate ownership, partnership stakes, investment funds. When the value of those systems grows, the value of your 10, 20, 50% ownership also grows. Ownership generates money in 2 ways: cash flow and appreciation. Cash flow means the system distributes profits, and appreciation means the value of the asset is self-increasing. And this is where we see one of the biggest differences between workers and wealth holders. Many people work inside businesses, but they do not own any part of them. Ownership is the dividing line between income earners and wealth builders. Now let's jump into engine number 5. In my opinion, one of the most important engines to generate generational wealth. And the 5th engine is capital allocation. This is what investing actually is. You deploy money into opportunities that have a chance of generating 100x returns. Now you'll ask me, Taha, this is what we've been doing. We've been getting assets. We've been getting ownership of things. And you're right. It is the same concept, but this time you have money. And when you have more money, you can take a little bit of a higher risk. And higher risk leads to higher rewards. So you're not just allocating capital into anything. You're allocating capital into things that have a chance of becoming something big, but they're not there yet. Some examples include angel investing, private equity, specialized fund managements. You analyze opportunities and you allocate resources, and then you capture the returns. Here's the kicker. Let's say you invest $50,000 into 100 different opportunities. Even if 90% of them fail, the 10% that were successful are going to pay for the rest of the 90% and so much more. At large scale, capital produces more income than labor ever could. This is why the largest fortunes in the world are maintained through capital allocation. Once capital reaches a certain level, money begins to generate more money automatically. This is the highest level of wealth engines. And once you've achieved that, none of your kids or their kids will ever have to worry about money. Now, to understand this more clearly, let's look at some real examples. Let's compare 3 different financial paths. Person A develops a high value skill only. They become a very high paid individual. They're making $200,000-$300,000 a year. They have strong income, but if they stop working, that income stops. And at this point, they're used to a high value lifestyle. Now, person B generates a skill, builds a business around that skill. They create digital products, invest profits into assets. Now their income goes beyond effort. Wealth begins to compound, and they're well in their way of creating generational wealth. And let's look at person number C. This person already has money and they're focusing on ownership and capital allocation. They own companies, they invest capital, their money produces more money consistently. This is where ultra high, wealthy people typically exist. So we've learned about the 5 engines. What can you and I do at this point? What's an actionable framework? How do most successful people actually progress through these engines? And it's a very common pattern. I call it the wealth progression ladder. And you have to see which step of the ladder you are in. But if you're starting from 0, step 1, you develop a high value skill. Step 2, you use that skill to generate income. Step number 3, you start converting those income into assets and building a side business. Step number 4, you have a skill, you have assets, you have business. Now you start accumulating ownership. And step number 5 is you start allocating capital strategically. This progression appears again and again among every successful individual to ever exist in this economy. And depending on where you are today, your starting point will be different. If you currently have no money, focus on building a skill. If you're earning an income, start building assets. If you have a little bit of a stability, start building a side business. If you have a profitable system start accumulating ownership. And once you have capital, start taking risks. Begin allocating capital strategically. And remember, every time I say strategically, you don't just start taking risks with a blindfold on, you do your research before taking those decisions. But here's the kicker, the most important rule we haven't talked about yet. And that rule is you never rely on one engine. You stack them. Skills lead to business, business build assets, assets create ownership, ownership enables capital allocation. Whenever you rely on just one engine, generational wealth becomes very, very, very difficult. Follow the stack because that stack becomes your wealth architecture. Now guys, once you start understanding income engines, your thinking begins to change. You stop asking how do I get paid more, and you start asking which engine am I building. You stop thinking like a worker and you start thinking like an economic operator. And that single change in perspective can permanently change your financial trajectory. Now you understand the engines, but most people still feel stuck at this point because they believe they need money to start doing anything. They think they need capital, investor, resources, but that's not true at all. And to show you that, in the next episode, I'm going to explain how to start generating income with zero capital using skill leverage, service model, and real world opportunities that exist right now. New episodes every Wednesdays and Sundays.